and also let you know some of the things we have upcoming at MMP. So again, thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions, you can use the question box at any time, and I'll make sure to pause for a few things. So this year, right, for the 2020-21 James Connolly Fund, we do a webinar every year just to make sure people know exactly what the fund is about the legacy of James Connolly. And so I'm going to walk through all of those pieces. And just to tell you a little bit about mass mentoring, I think most people kind of know about us. You're on the webinar, you found us, but just a general framing. We support over 370 organizations, all doing work to support young people and adult in relationships. We believe that relationships are a lever for positive youth outcomes. And so we do that in lots of different spaces. That can be mentoring programs, schools, workplaces, after school spaces, YMCAs, wherever youth and adults are connecting, we want to be there to make sure that you're getting the support you need as program folks. Our framework for doing that is called Relationships in Action. And we do 4 things, and they kind of happen all at the same time. And some of you might have experienced some of these in your relationship with MMP, but we assess. So we want to understand what's happening in the field, who's doing the work, where's the work happening. So we do that a few ways. Our staff are out there constantly kind of networking and being informed by your work. We actually have a biannual survey called Mass Mentoring Counts, where we find out information from you, from programs, to figure out exactly what's happening in the field. And we also have an AmeriCorps program called Ambassadors of Mentoring. And those folks are out doing some of that work for us as well. We build capacity, right? So our AmeriCorps Ambassadors of Mentoring certainly do that. They're in, over 20 nonprofit organizations across the state. Doing mentoring, formal structured mentoring work. We have trainings, webinars, offerings to share content with our programs. We offer funding opportunities such as this one. We also have the Mentor Matching Grant, which is coming up. That RFP will be released in about a month, and that is for formal structured mentoring programs across the Commonwealth. We work with our legislators, we advocate, which you see as one of our other pieces of the framework, to have a line item in the budget for mentoring. This year it went up to $1 million. We're super excited about that and still advocating to push it forward to support your work in formal structured mentoring programs. Down there you see Lily Mendez, our CEO, for our advocacy. That is from Youth Mentoring Day, which is our huge advocacy day at the State House. We had over 300 folks this year, so it was really exciting. We believe that stakeholders, legislators, folks should know what is happening and understand how important relationships are. So we do that work on behalf of the field, and we also support you to do that work. So offer trainings and support to help you with your advocacy and policy response. And then last but not least, we connect, right? So we believe that we know that you all are out doing the good work, and we want to hear from you, learn from you, and help you support each other to hear and learn and share best practice. So we have networking events, any of our trainings that are in person, any of our other events, whether it's a fundraising event or our advocacy events, we always try to include some networking time because we really do believe in the strength of our programs and our network. And in fact, we have an event coming up next Monday that is an online webinar to support programs kind of during this time. As we now have moved everything remotely and we're connecting virtually, we still think relationships are super important for young people, especially in this time. And so are holding a networking meeting to just kind of hear and see what's going on, see how MMP can best support you all. And I'll share the link with that, the link to that after this webinar. So that's MMP. This is me, Senior Manager of Program Services. As I said, I've been at MMP for about exactly 5 years, I think, as of March. So I work with a team of about 6 to develop content, to support programs, and again, to make sure that you all are doing the best work that you can be doing. That's how you can find me. I'm accessible by email, especially during this time. You can tweet at me if you want. You can tweet from this webinar and share that with your network if you choose to. But myself and my colleagues are here to support you with your needs. And so our agenda for today, we did some introductions. I see we have about 14 folks on the line. So again, welcome everyone from wherever you are. I'm going to overview the fund, just kind of why, who was Jim Connolly, what is this about? We're going to talk about our focus for 2020, 2021. I'm going to review the application. I'll be hopping in and out of this presentation and sharing my screen so you can see the actual application online, because we changed our online process a bit this year. So I want to make sure that I review that. The requirements, I'll hop through not each and every one. Again, you have in the handouts you have a copy of the actual RFP, which outlines all of the pieces, all of the kind of criteria and everything. So I'll be highlighting like some key things, and you can follow along with that document. The selection process, the dates that you need to know, deadline, when the money will be distributed, all that, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. Again, as always, feel free to ask questions throughout the course of the webinar using the chat function on your GoToWebinar panel. And then at the end of the webinar, if I can, if folks have questions, there's a smaller group of us, so I think I can even unmute and we can hear from each other and hear your voices. So I'll try to do that towards the end. All right. So the James G. Connolly Tribute Fund. I want to share just a little bit about who James Connolly was and why it's important that we do this. This is our 10th year distributing the fund in collaboration with the Connolly family. You see in this photo, this is from, I forget which year this was, but that's Eric Thompson from EV Kids there with Mrs. Connolly and her sons off to the right of the frame. So it's something that she and her family, do every year. They come up with the theme, supported by MMP, kind of thinking about what does the field need, what's relevant, how are ways that we can support programs, and we kind of do the work to distribute and manage the grant. So the fund was established in memory of Jim Connolly, Mass Mentoring Partnership's board chair, who passed away in 2010, in honor of his leadership and volunteer service. It was created to provide support for an annual award or project aligned with Mass Mentoring's mission of expanding positive youth-adult relationships across Massachusetts. The funds were raised with the help and leadership of Jim's wife, Maureen. It was a challenge grant offered by one of his mentors, and through the incredible generosity of hundreds of Jim's colleagues and friends and lead corporate funders, including Citizens Bank, Bank of America, and FBR Capital Markets. So, Mrs. Connolly and her family are constantly raising funds for this to continue to be able to support programs, and that's why we've been able to do this for 10 years now. Just a little bit more about Jim. He saw the world as the sum of his parts, family, community, and people of all walks of life, and was the antithesis of a man who said he had gotten anywhere all on his own. The fund serves as a mechanism to both honor his life and values and to enhance and expand the support and encouragement that many adults provide to many more young people across the Commonwealth. So Jim, had mentors throughout his life. Mentoring and support were really important to him. I believe he was a softball or baseball coach and contributed and served his community in lots of different ways. And so in his memory, we have this fund to be able to support programs to continue to build those youth-adult connections. So this year, the 2020-2021 focus in its 10th year, and speaking with Mrs. Connolly, she really wanted something to honor his legacy and to kind of highlight, really what Jim was about in his life. And so in doing that, we have a geographic program focus, and we'll dive into this in just a moment, but it is to enhance and expand existing programs or develop new programs that support empowering youth-adult relationships in the communities of Boston or Cape Cod and the islands. And so what this means pretty plainly, and I have a map and everything to share with you, is that it is for any any program supporting youth-adult relationships in those communities. So it can be a little league baseball program. It can be a formal structured mentoring program. It could be a program inside of a school. It can be a workforce development program. We are just looking for any program that wants to enhance what is currently doing, possibly expand something that they're doing, or even if it's a new program. So if you have a really great idea, maybe you're an existing organization and this is a new project or program, um, that is something that this fund can support as well. So I want to be really, really clear about what we mean by community. So Jim was from South Boston. So Mrs. Connolly, came to us and said, really want to honor his kind of neighborhood, where he came from, and the city that Jim loved. And so this map, and it was really interesting trying to find a map of the city of Boston, because a lot of times it'll have, Boston Metro or other communities. And this one, even if you look up to the top, and I actually have a version of this in my bedroom, you can't see it, but it includes Cambridge, Belmont, some of the metro surrounding areas. But for our purposes, we are talking about the city of Boston, the city of Boston proper. So those are the really colorful highlighted neighborhoods that you see here. These neighborhoods are taken from the city of Boston.gov. So these are the 23 neighborhoods that represent the city of Boston. So if your program is not functioning in these neighborhoods, or your young people are not from these neighborhoods, then your program is not eligible or considered a program of the city of Boston. So Somerville does not count. Cambridge, Medford, Framingham. We are talking about the city of Boston specifically. So if your program is not located in one of these 23 neighborhoods, physically we'd like it to be located there, but certainly the young people that you serve need to be located in one of these 23 neighborhoods. The relationships have to be in these neighborhoods. So I'm saying it very specifically and very clearly and repeating myself because I've had a few questions about this, and I get that because a lot of times when we talk about Boston, we are talking about, I'm right over the river in Somerville. So I get it, and I wanted to be clear, and this is to honor the intent of Mrs. Connolly, the Connolly family, in honoring the legacy of Jim and the city that he loved. So that's for the city of Boston. Or the other area that we are including is the Cape and Islands. I believe they have a relationship to the Cape. I think Mrs. Connolly lives there now, vacation there, probably did some volunteer work there. And so it was a place that Jim loved, and want to make sure that we send some love over to the Cape and Islands as a part of this fund. What do I mean by Cape and Islands? And again, you'd be surprised how hard it was to try to find a map of just the Cape and Islands. And I even had to email some folks to be like, what are we talking about? But this is what we're talking about specifically. So Upper Cape, Mid Cape, Lower Cape, Outer Cape, the islands. So essentially, like for those of you who, and again, I'm not from Massachusetts, but I understand it's like once you cross that bridge, right? If you go past the Sagamore or whatever, that's where we're talking about. I've had some questions about South Coast. My girlfriend lives in Wareham, so I'm like, oh, that's the Cape. For our purposes, we are only including these cities and towns, or there might be some villages listed there, but what is highlighted on the map. I asked questions, and I was checking and looking at officially what do we consider the Cape, and this is what we came up with. So my apologies for programs that are not in these communities. Again, just like for the city of Boston, your program needs to be serving young people in these communities, in these particular towns or cities of the Cape and the islands. So any questions about that? Hope that's really clear for people. We're gonna put this up on the website as well, so people can reference this, but this is specifically where we're talking about. All right, so no questions? All right. So the application overview, and this is the document that you have attached in handouts. You have a PDF copy of it and you have a Word copy of it. Provided that is a Word copy, and it's also, I think, linked from our email as a Google Doc. We ask that you go to the Google Doc and kind of copy it and then take it and use it as a template. So that's what we're providing it for, so you can, kind of write it up and then copy and paste your answers in the actual application, which I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to hop around to a few different sections, and then at the end, I'm going to review exactly what I mean in terms of the application and applying for the application or applying for the fund. So section 3 is organizational overview. And so please provide a clear and concise description of your organization that includes your mission and brief history, right? I think a lot of us have that as boilerplate language. What we are looking for is also, this is essentially, these bullets are your theory of change, right? And so we'd like it written out. I know a lot of people have visual theories of change. You can attach that if that's helpful to you, but we're really looking for the answers to these questions. So your program's target population, so that's who you're currently serving possibly, or if it's a new program, who is it, right? Who are the young people? You can even answer if you have a specific population for mentors, who are the adults that you're looking for? The impact or change that your program is intended to have. So what does your program do? How your program, and excuse me, my screen is blocking this, designed to achieve the intended impact and the local needs and context. So essentially, why your program, right? What, a lot of times this will be framed as, what is the problem that your program is intending to solve? Being strengths-based is, why relationships as a lever for whichever outcome you're looking to achieve. So a lot of times in this section, what we'll see is some research. We will see, people kind of linking back to their logic model, possibly is another term that you might have heard about this, but we really want to understand, what is your program doing? Why is your program doing what it's doing? And what is the intended outcome of your program? So if you're telling me that mentoring is really important for young people in Martha's Vineyard because X, Y, and Z, right? Why Martha's Vineyard, right? Tell me a little bit about Martha's Vineyard, what's going on there. Why mentoring? Why do you think youth adult relationships, mentoring specifically as a modality of a youth adult relationship, is important for these young people? There might be some research, certainly, that we can even support you in finding for that. And then why the way that you are doing mentoring? Because we want to make sure that you are really thinking about the context and what's going on. So you're mentoring, you can't just pick up the same program that someone would be doing, in Cambridge and take it to Martha's Vineyard, right? So we want to know that your program is adapted and designed specifically for your target population, and that you've thought about and kind of done the work to say, this program will have this impact because of X. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to let me know. We can share some information about theories of change. And again, it's something that sometimes programs struggle with. It's something that we kind of know and we like feel in our heart. We may not use this language for it, but that's why we have these specific bullet points to guide you to think about what exactly are you doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and what the impact is supposed to be. So section 4, the project description. So we just want to know, what is the project? What if it's an existing program that you are trying to support? Why? What does your program do? How will it enhance youth adult relationships? Will it provide new opportunities? And if it's a project of a particular program, so you might even say, and we can go over some strategies, we want the funding to support recruitment for our program, and we're going to launch a recruitment campaign. You guys just let us know why, right? Is that an innovative strategy? Is it something that you really need in this moment? So figuring out what your project specifically is and just sharing that here. So section 6, again, this is past experience. Again, you see I'm hopping around and skipping some sections because I wanted to highlight the ones that I think, one, are really important to us. All of them are important, but really highlighting the ones that, you might have some questions about, but really describing your experience with youth and adult relationships in the community you plan to serve. So this is also where we want to see your understanding of community culture, the culture of the adults and youth you plan to engage, any collaborations you have, past experience. So if you've been operating for a while, if it's, a new program, we'd like to know why now, right? But this is also where we're looking for some cultural responsiveness and understanding of, again, the community that you're in and the experience that you have in supporting young people and adults. So project alignment, this is how your project aligns with the spirit of the Connolly Tribute Fund. So, shared a little bit about James and who he was, and, how he really supported mentoring, believed in relationships. So really thinking about how your project supports those youth adult relationships, how does it align with Jim's legacy, and how your project will continue to contribute to Jim's legacy. And I will say section 10, obviously, again, we read all the sections. Mrs. Connolly is really looking for something. Mrs. Connolly and her sons, they both, they all read the applications, that highlights an understanding of the importance of relationships and the importance of relationships for young people's success. I see a quick question, so I'll pause for a second. Let me answer this question for you. I'm trying to pop it out in my question box. So yeah, I can answer. Is the fund expecting that there may be some adjustments to proposals due to the quarantine? So I think right now, yeah, it's hard to say. I think you should think about what your program is currently planning. And so, I could even see the fund is for programming that happens from, and we'll look at the dates from, I think, July 2020 into next year. So fingers crossed, we will be done with this quarantine, or at least coming out of it at that time. But I will say that, some of our programs are going to be changed forever in terms of the way we run programs. There's some innovation that's happening now that could be really interesting. So I think it's for your program to decide in that grant time frame, where do you think you will be? And so, you might say, all right, we're moving forward with the assumption that young people will be back in school in September. We're going to be operating our program similarly to how we've done it in the past. And so we're going to ask for funding to support that type of project. You might also say, wow, we came up with some really innovative remote mentoring strategies that we now want to kind of play out and have some funding to support. You could write for that as well. So I think it's really, it's what is the level of optimism in your organization and what is your organization planning for? Now, if your organization says, or program says, you know what, we're going to plan for the reality that we're currently in and write this for our current reality, which means that students are in school, our program is actually not functioning. So you might create a project that aligns with more remote access or relationship building. That is what she's going to be reading, and in our, right, and the applications are read first internally by an MP, some of our staff, certainly the program services team and a few other staff, and then Mrs. Connolly and her sons read the finalists along with Lily Mendez, our CEO, and then David Shapiro, who's CEO of Mentor, but he was our CEO at MNP when James Connolly was on our board. So they have 2 rounds of review, and I think they will be looking for, okay, if the funding is for July 2021 all the way, or excuse me, 2020 all the way up to, 2021, what do we think will be happening in that year? So I know maybe that's that's not an absolute question or answer to your question, but I think we will be operating with the assumption that we will be returning to normal or a new normal, and your programs will be operating kind of back up to where they were. If that is not the assumption that your program is making, that is okay. But I think you'd want to include that in your application, and say, our program has pivoted due to, you know, having to shift operations because of the coronavirus, and thus this project supports remote mentoring or remote relationship building because we really understand how important it is. And even if, I would probably say, like, some sort of contingency, if that's where you want to go with it, I would say even if we resume normal quote unquote programming, this is going to be an additional either project or something that supports relationships in that way. So I hope that's helpful. Great, so I'll move on to Section 11, so budget information. What we are looking for here, and this is in your application, you'll notice in the application this particular form is there, but there's also a link to a Google Sheets version of it. We'd prefer for you to go into the Google Sheets version and fill that out and then attach that to your final application online. So it's a budget summary and a budget narrative. We want to see the budget for this project or this program. And so you'll notice that it goes line by line, and we ask for what the Connolly Fund contribution is, what your program contribution. Your program doesn't necessarily, it's not a matching grant or anything, so if there is no contribution from the program or organization, that is fine. I will say one of the other questions that we did not outline is I think section 7 and 8 about outcomes and sustainability. We're going to want to know what the outcomes are connected to. So if it is, a workforce development program, I could see one of the outcomes being that young people gain, skills to support them in the workforce. Depending on your program and what you believe your program can do, it might even be that the young person is gainfully employed in 2 to 3 years post-program completion. That outcome is not something that obviously the Connolly Funds here and now can actually um, support. So I would do outcomes that are related to and achievable within the year of your program. All of that to say, they're also looking at sustainability. So is this something that is going to continue after, this year? The Connolly Fund is only for a year. And so that might mean that your program would have a contribution of some sort. So that's up to you all to figure out what exactly that looks like. So whether you are contributing funding and that's part of your budget document for the current year, but that is one of the other questions, and I know that's a typical question, like in nonprofit, grant applications. How are you going to sustain it? But particularly if it is an existing program, we probably expect to see some budget contribution from the organization. If it's a new program and you're trying something out, make sure you include that in those sections so we have an understanding when we then look at the grant or look at the budget to see how it aligns. And so the summary, we're just looking for the numbers, and then in the narrative is just kind of writing out exactly what that is for and offering a little explanation. All right, and so the grant requirements. Sign cooperative agreements. There's a mid-year and a actually end of year as well report and a site visit that happens sometime between January, February-ish, depending on what's going on in the world. But that is myself or one of my colleagues coming out and checking in with you, collecting and reporting evaluation data. And then the other requirement is leadership attending Champions of Mentoring on June 17th. Now, right now, we are assuming that Champions of Mentoring will be happening on June 17th. If anything changes, we will let you know. But still, that does not affect the distribution of the grant, right? So we're still running with the typical RFP process, and whether or not the selected organizations are able to be presented at Champions of Mentoring is, something that really is up to the Red Sox to let us know if the event is happening or not. So either way, I'll show you the kind of dates and deadlines for when the program would be notified, and then it's a matter of when M&P will announce the um, recipients, and that typically happens with Champions of Mentoring, but if not, we will probably then announce just online at some point. All right, so selection criteria, what are we looking for? And this picture, for folks online, that's Deborah and Maya, the folks from Big Sister, who received the Connolly Fund, I think in 2015, I want to say, and that's one of Mrs. Connolly's sons right there. So what we want what we're looking at when we're looking at the organizations and your projects, so expand or enhance programmatic and or organizational practices to support empowering youth adult relationships. So that can be looking at any of, if you're a formal structured mentoring program, looking at any of the standards of the elements of effective practice. And you might pick one and say, you know what, we really want to enhance our match support. We're going to try this new system. We're going to offer new trainings to our mentors. So, we need to, staff might need to get additional training to be able to do some piece of that work better. As an organization, we might need, let's say, cultural responsiveness training to better support the young people and families in our communities. You might have a specific practice around parent and family engagement, and you want to start doing home visits as a part of your program, and again, need some funding for training and support of that. So it's really looking at your practices, looking at your programming and saying, this is what we're going to do. If it's a program that is currently operating, to enhance it. So we're doing this, we want to do it better. We need the money to support that. If it's expansion of, we want to grow the program and serve more people, so we need to either hire more staff or we need to, buy more supplies or do something, explaining that. If it's a new program and it's like, okay, so we actually need to pay a quarter of, the program coordinator's salary with this, or have access to other resources, translation services. It can be anything that you think is actually going to support empowering youth adult relationships. And I should say, I realize I don't think I said it yet, but it's in the application information and all of our promotion. The Connolly Fund is typically up to $20,000. 2 to 3 organizations is typically 2, depending on the number of applications that we get and what the requests are. This past year, it was awarded to 3 organizations because we had one organization that only needed a small amount of funding to achieve what they wanted to do. So typically 2 to 3, and so they range from $10,000 to $15,000. Some can be a little smaller, 7,000. It really depends on what you're doing and kind of what these other criteria here. So contribute to a larger dialogue about youth adult relationships as a lever for positive youth outcomes. So again, we're looking at collaborations. Who are you talking to? How is this supporting and influencing and contributing to a broader conversation in your community? Can you sustain the project once the grant period ends? Impact of the project on current and existing relationships. Your compliance with other M&P grants or partnerships. So certainly if you're a longstanding partner of M&P, we're going to take a look at our relationship. If you are a new partner to M&P, that's not a problem, but we're going to just want to note what the history has been there. And then a quality application. And I will say this about quality applications because I think it's important in thinking about equity and grant making and whatnot. We know that there are some organizations that many of our organizations that have more capacity for grant writing, and so have a whole team of people who can kind of work on this and really craft something because that's what they do, that's what they're paid for, and so have really high quality applications. We also know that sometimes there are smaller organizations that do not have that whole team and perhaps do not have as much expertise in grant writing. So when we say quality of application, we're looking for basics of like grammar, structure, things like that. But we are also looking with that lens of understanding the organization and the program and kind of where they sit in the place, and you know, being mindful of that, because we don't want to just continually support just the organizations that are able to do that work because they have more funding, more support, and they're able to hire the staff that can write the grants and whatnot. So we, again, as we're reviewing all of these things, we have the lens of equity and inclusion as we are looking at the criteria. So I say that to say that for a good application or the quality of the application, really we want it to be meaningful, we want it to be thoughtful, we want to be able to kind of follow your thought process, really understand your organization, and are looking for just like the basics in terms of, kind of structure and grammar. So let's see. Any questions about that? I'm gonna take a sip of coffee. Okay, so then I'm going to show you, I'm gonna actually share my screen to break out of the presentation and go to the application. So there are 2 steps to applying for MMP funding. And this is a change from the way that we have done this last year or any of the previous years. Again, looking at our processes with the lens for equity and inclusion, we don't want to be a gatekeeper. We don't want to have unnecessary barriers. So we have decided to create what we're calling the MMP Common Application. And so what we're asking programs to do is fill out the Common Application one time. And then for each grant opportunity, you fill out a supplemental application. So for instance, if you are, and I'm just going to use Boston Partners because Peter, I know you're on the line. If you, they in the past have had an ambassador of mentoring. This year, for the ambassador of mentoring RFP, which was released earlier this year, we did the same thing. Fill out the common application and then fill out the second, much shorter supplemental application. If Boston Partners in Education had applied for an AOM earlier this year, now when it's time to complete the application for the Connolly Fund, they don't have to go back to the common application. They can access it if things have changed in the organization, if they need to update any of the information, but now they just need to create or provide and submit the Connolly Fund application. So for people who have not filled out MMP's common application, step 1 is where you want to start. If you've already done that, step 2, you can go straight to step 2. And what I'm going to do is open up both of these so we can run through them really quickly. So these are all run through our QuickBase system. It's our online kind of database. And so for us, the reason why this is helpful is also that it keeps our information kind of condensed and all together. So this is the Common Grant application. We want to know, how did you hear about this opportunity? So just in general, how did you hear about MMP? And then we ask you for your organizational information, federal ID number. We're looking at your org budget overall. So that's, again, the overall larger organization budget. You might have multiple programs within the organization. We want to know who completed it, all of that good stuff. Program coordinator, ED, that's our way of getting information of who's in the organization, just some basics so we can make sure that we're sending the information to the right people, and just knowing what other opportunities have you accessed through MMP. So mentor matching grant, AOM, and then the Connolly Award are our 3 kind of financial opportunities. The area that you have your program in, so the service area, kind of this is geographic sections of the state. We at MMP have regional focuses. And so that came out of our Mass Mentoring Counts survey a few years ago. We looked at, where are the programs in the state? Where might we need additional support, right? We believe that every young person should have access to a caring adult anywhere that they are. And we also know that certain communities need a little bit more support. And so our focused areas are Cape Cod and the Islands, Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Hampden County, out west, and then Lynn and Lawrence. Your match model. So this is for if you're formal structured mentoring, this question might be a little easier for you to answer, right? Are you doing one-to-one? Are you doing group? Is it a team? If you're not, and your program is generally like a youth adult program, you might select group, or you can just leave that alone, right? We realize that's a very specific question to formal structured mentoring programs. And then the location, we try to be as kind of inclusive as possible about where your folks are meeting, just because we want to have a sense of who you are, what you do, where you're going, all that good stuff. And also, this is helpful for us because many of you who are in, again, our formal structured mentoring world might be in the Mentor Connector, which is something that's run by Mentor. It's a database that anybody can kind of go on and say, I'm looking for a mentor in this zip code, and if you've inputted your information and you've been approved, then your organization will show up in a list of programs that person could then contact. For our programs that either are not in the connector, they're not formal structured, you're doing other work that's really meaningful and important, this allows us, I can't tell you how many times I get calls from programs or people wanting to know, my kid is in 6th grade, we live in, Dorchester, he's interested in basketball. What programs can you send them to? So letting us know exactly, where you meet, more information, it goes into our database. So then we get those calls, and if they haven't gone to the connector, or the connector is not useful for them, I can also go in the database and have up-to-date information about your programs to be able to share with, parents, families, caregivers, or other programs who might be looking for a program similar to theirs to network with. So long answer to say, it's really helpful for us to have as much information as possible. That also then relates to the youth information. So a lot of times we may not track this information. So if you don't know, you can put not applicable. I don't know why that we're very excited exclamation point is there. And so we also have, so your mentor to mentee ratio, and that would just be some numbers. Please enter the current number of youth that fall into the following categories. If you don't know, just put not applicable. So again, we often get questions, and sometimes this is from our legislative partners, of who in my community is serving this population of young people. So we know that in some cases you may not have the answer to all this. This may not be something you actually track. You can just put not applicable. So we have some categories that are like common across programs that you see. The race, ethnicities, not a question, but please enter the number of mentees that fall into the categories. Is something that, again, is helpful for us as we're thinking about who's being served, and have a sense of that. Same thing for age range, and then for gender. We are asking, what number of young people are in those categories. So that's cisgender male, cisgender female, trans, gender non-binary, gender non-conforming. If you have youth who, if you ask young people, so we're not asking you to make assumptions here. This is if you actually collect the information. Then we have other, because we realize that this category can be broad. And again, if you have questions specifically about those terms, there's a great resource from Mentor that can help you out. How many youth do you serve across the organization? And what is the total number of youth in mentoring relationships? So that is, you might be, if you're a YMCA, you might be serving 320 youth. In your mentoring or relationship-oriented programs, you might only be serving 100 youth. So again, I just want to understand exactly kind of the nature of your program. Do you have a wait list? That's the number that the state always asks us for when we go to say, we need more support for mentoring, more support for mentoring. The wait list number is something that they ask for. And then what we are asking for you is some of that common information that you probably just have ready for every single grant that you fill out. So your org budget, your audit, your IRS tax determination letter, and the org chart. So out of all of this, I imagine the only thing that might change is the org chart, possibly, right? And then your e-signature for your ED, and then submit it. Once you submit it, you're good. If something has changed, that link, you should get a link. You should get an email that says, hey, you submitted this application, and then a link to go back and change it. If for whatever reason you've forgotten it, if you're a new person and you're not sure, but we can always send you the link so you can update your application. This is something new we're trying, and we want to try to limit the stress and the work, because things like your org budget and your audit, they're not changing each time you apply for funding, and so want to just have one place where you can put that information. So that is the common application. So again, if you have not filled this out, you need to start here for MMP. And we need both of these pieces, because what we do is when we're doing our review, I have Greg maybe go in and grab the org budget and the audit just to determine that these things are, fiscally sound and where they should be. I see a question. If this is a program that exists within a school, do you want information about the entire school? So that's interesting. I would want, yes, I think I would want, if possible, the school information, because it sits within the context of the school, and that gives us some sense of, so if you have 1,000 students and you have a mentoring program that serves, 40, that's great. And you have a program, but it gives us a sense of the scope and the scale of the work that you're doing. And then another question from Sally. If the organization serves the city of Boston mostly, but the proposed work innovation impacts the whole service area, is the proposed work still eligible? I mean, I think for that, yes, it would be eligible. I think you would want to, in your application, highlight, though, exactly the impact on that service area, your commitment to Boston, and you can say, in some ways, that's also attractive of like, we are going to do this work for this specific group of young people, but it will have a ripple effect on the rest of our programming. So that's fine. But we need to know, just like some of you are mentor matching grantees, when I ask you in that application, how many young people are you serving total, and how many young people are being served by this funding? So that would be the number that you would want to hone in on and say, in the city of Boston, we serve X amount of young people. These are the young people who are going to be impacted by that funding. Yet we also know, because we're going to do this across the organization, the young people in, Lynn or Lawrence or wherever else your organization is serving, Cambridge, will also be impacted. But I would really highlight, in terms of your impact numbers and the things that we're looking for, highlighting specifically the city of Boston, young people who you're serving. All right, and so gonna just go through really quickly our other form, and then have more time for question and answer. So I'll click here. So again, and these links are live. They will be in the presentation for you to click. So this, once you've done the Common App, right? So if you're Big Sister, if you're one of our other programs who we know have applied for other funding previously, you can skip all of that other stuff and go straight to the Common App. And so this is essentially everything that I just went over. This is what's attached to the webinar here. And so same thing we're looking for, we still want to know, what is the parent organization name? So who's the broader, so for that question about the school, what school is it? And then the mentoring program name / youth development program name, right? If it's the same, that's fine. For some of our smaller programs, it's exactly the same, but it might be, Big Brother, Big Sister, but the actual program name is your community-based programming, or this is for Mentor 2.0, right? And sometimes there's different mailing addresses and stuff. So we're just being a little thorough and asking for information. Then really we want the project narrative. And then we want your budget. And actually there should be a space here for you to upload that. So my apologies, we'll make that available, but you will just go ahead and choose the file and upload that information, and then you'll sign and you're good to go. So this is literally, we just want that narrative and budget from you. All the other information that gives us more context and more overview, we're going to go right back to that Common App and get that for you. So that's it. And you should get, for both of these, you should be getting when you submit, or when you, if you say save and close instead of submitting, you should then get an email with a link to be able to go back into the application and update it at any time. And if for whatever reason you get locked out or you can't find it or it's not working, you can contact myself or our operations associate, Olivia Taylor, is supporting this process. So she can answer your questions as well. If you don't check that box that says submit, and that's for both of these applications, then it's not that they're not real, but they are not going to be reviewed. So please make sure that you check submit. If it looks to me that you have intended to submit but did not click submit, then Olivia or I will probably reach out to you just to be sure, but definitely hit submit. And even after you hit submit, if it's not, the deadline has not approached you, you want to change something, that's also totally fine as well. So let's go back to our presentation. Great. So important dates to remember. Application deadline is Monday, April 20th. So give you about a solid month at 5 p.m. To do this. Programs will be notified by May 29th. So that gives us time to do our reviews and make a selection. Champions of Mentoring, again, fingers crossed that will be happening, is supposed to be June 17th. And then I just have to move my screen to make sure. So July 2020 to June 30th. So it's July to June. I think I was saying some other dates. But so for, again, those of you thinking about what is the reality that we're going to be dealing with, should we be writing about programs as if, we are still remote and schools are not in session? We are going to leave that to your organization to think about. Just like anything, you're thinking about what is the vision for this grant period. So that is your grant period. And let's see, any questions? Again, we're basically at the end, but I want to make sure I get questions from you. Let me see if I can unmute everyone really quickly. I'm not sure if I can do that, but I will try. Chat, sharing. Don't think right now, I'm not seeing the space where I would unmute people. So if you have a question, type it, and I'll make sure to answer that question. All right, don't see anything. I'm gonna just go to our last slide here. So if there's no questions, thank you so much. I hope this has been helpful. Again, oh, I do see a question. There we go. This is from Imelda. Our program pairs full-time staff with college students to support them through college. Does this fit into your mentoring requirements? Yes. So this is not as strict as, for those of you who are familiar with our mentor matching grant application, that is specific to formal structured mentoring form because it comes from the Department of Education, K through 12. So that might be more information than you need, but that's just some context. For us, when we think of mentoring, and I appreciate that you put in quotes, you may not be able to see me, I'm doing air quotes here at home. We think of mentoring, big M, little m, right? So mentoring as a verb, right, we know happens anywhere and everywhere. Mentoring happens informally. You don't have to be in a formal structured program to be mentored. And you can be mentored by, the the guy from your barber shop, right? We are looking for programs, right? You do have to be an actual program, but it doesn't have to be like elements of effective practice, formal structured mentoring. So yes, they can be staff, they could be folks who are paid, they can be college students. So our definition of youth, also to be clear, goes from about age 7 to 24. Right. And so for those of you who've been some of our other trainings and we kind of look at, brain development and when young people develop that frontal cortex and all that, we will take it up to college. So yes, your program definitely fits into those parameters. And for all of you, again, we're looking for, especially in that theory of change, why mentoring where there's big and little, and why relationship, right? So why is a relationship critical to supporting these college students through college, and how have you crafted your program to support that relationship? So I think that's it. Just want to let you all know again, coming up, we have M&P Staying Connected, a networking meeting. That's on Monday, March 30th from 1 to 2:30. There's the link. We'll make sure you get that. And that email, I believe, is coming out also on Friday for people. What we are also doing is realizing that, things are changing and we need to kind of think differently about some of the ways that we've been operating for formal structured mentoring programs, and these could be helpful for other folks. We've identified a few topics being match support, right? So if you still have matches who are operating, if you still have your staff and your young people connecting, how do you support that? Closure. A lot of relationships close really quickly in an unexpected way. How do you continue to support young people and your mentors in that process? If you haven't closed, what would you be looking to do? What are some policies you might be thinking about? Same thing for match support, keeping people connected remotely. Some organizations previously, you weren't able to use social media or connect with young people. But now, given the time, is that something we want to change, and what should we be considering? And then parent engagement. In this time, especially, parent and family engagement is really important, right? Staying connected with the young people, with the people who care about the young people. So we're going to be offering this initial webinar to just kind of network and share and just kind of say like, wow, yes, this is tough. And this is what we might need from M&P. And then the remaining 3 webinars, which we'll send the information out tomorrow, will be 1 hour, just really like, here's the top 5 things you need to be thinking about right now. Also, we're here to provide technical assistance or consultation. We can do that remotely to support you in whatever you need. So I will stop talking. I'm over by like 2 minutes. Thank you all for your participation. If you have any questions, this is where you can find me, J Smith at Mass Mentors. And good luck, and thank you all for doing the work that you do, and keeping people connected and trying and what are really, really challenging times. So we appreciate you, and hopefully we'll see some applications from some folks. All right, have a good day.